All right. Hey, welcome everybody. This is Rick Kaufman, your host with the Kels Group, aka the Drowning Warriors. Episode number 43 is going to come at you here in just a minute. But today, our guest, we are spotlighting and talking to Tim Coleman of Fluid Design Concepts. His website is www.fdcva.com. Okay, he is an aquatics designer with over 45 years of hands-on and design, construction, operation, and educational experience in the aquatics industry. So, with that being said, you're going to want to stay tuned for this because this is a discussion. We're going to talk about some things here that if you attend a pool, or maybe you have your own pool in your backyard, but maybe you attend a public pool, a community pool, you're going on vacation, a hotel pool, things that you probably have never thought about when you talk about a pool. If you're an aquatics director, obviously maintenance, all those things have to be a concern of yours. So here are some topics, some information for you to consider. So you may want to get out your pen, paper. If you're driving, don't worry about it. Come back and listen to it. You can also go to thekelsgroup.com, check out our show notes, and there'll be links to and everything to his website and also his contact information there. But with that being said, I'm going to grab me another cup of coffee, that is. And it is February 7th. It's Thursday, and it's Ohio. Weather is crappy here in Ohio right now, but you know what? It'll change. Just wait. But I know it's nice in summer someplace. People are enjoying the water, the beaches, and everything. So drowning never takes a day off. It doesn't discriminate. Neither do we. So from that standpoint, let's cue the music. Let's get this show started. Hello, I'm Rick Kaufman. I'm part of a new breed of people. We call ourselves the Drowning Warriors. We have a voice for those who no longer have a voice, and for those that do have a voice, we project it as loud as we can because what we know can and does save lives. We wage war every day with people that just don't believe that it can happen to them. We must do things differently. We take massive action as a team. We must do things smarter. We must also be effective with our message from day one. You see, the average person does not believe that it can happen to them, but yet it happens every day. Drowning does not discriminate. It has no boundaries. It is fast. It is silent. It hits when you least expect it. So we fight every day to be heard, to get our messages out to the masses. We are the Drowning Warriors, and these are our stories. All right. Hey, welcome, everybody. This is Rick Kaufman, your host with the Kels Group, aka the Drowning Warriors. And I am here today with our guest, Tim Coleman. And Tim actually has over 40 years of experience as far as hands-on design, construction, operational, and educational experience. He and I met just probably in the last couple of weeks via LinkedIn. So again, my listeners, if you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing the opportunity to connect with a lot of professional people like Tim that can talk to you about various aspects of water safety, drowning prevention. But Tim brings an aspect to water safety that is an area that we have not really talked on or talked much about here in the Kels Group. But he's opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I think some of us who've lost a loved one to a drowning, some of the issues that may come up could be potentially things with the actual facility, the pool, the building, the plumbing, the pump, the fencing. Just there's a myriad of information here. So Tim just got back from a conference, and he's going to speak to us a little bit about that. But so welcome, Tim. Glad to have you.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. We're looking forward to this here. Tim, tell me, before we actually jump into some things, with 40 years experience, and, that's a lot of time and a lot of experience. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, well, I started at my outdoor community pool when I was just a child and passed their preliminary swimming test at the age of 7, which the greatest thing for me was it allowed me the freedom to go to the pool by myself, which I became known as what is commonly referred to as a pool rat. I was the kid who was there at opening, and I would be gone at dinner time and perhaps even come back, and I was there every day during the summer, and I enjoyed the freedom I had at the pool and the safety of being watched and monitored, and it was a really great thing. But I actually I passed my lifeguarding class or life-saving class when I was 14, which technically I was supposed to be 15, but A week later, I was 15, and it was all good. But so the following year, that year I was a gate guard. I watched the pool gate and allowed people into the pool. But the following year, I was a lifeguard, and by the time I was 17, I was a certified swimming pool operator, which means I knew how to run the equipment, and I was a water safety instructor through the Red Cross, which allowed me the ability to teach swimming lessons from aqua babies all the way through lifeguards and into seniors. So you could see where I kind of enjoyed the water a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When I became a licensed operator, that meant that I was allowed to operate in that particular county, which is Montgomery County, Maryland. I was licensed to operate the pool as a manager. So I was now responsible for the operation of the facility, the equipment, the sanitation, and keeping logs, and the overall safety of the facility. That also led me into my college degrees. I have an associate's degree in recreation leadership and a bachelor's degree in outdoor recreation. But eventually I went on to own a swimming pool management company and did that for over 20 years. At one time having 23 facilities in 4 different counties in Maryland. Became a Maryland licensed swimming pool operator, different certification. But I left the glory of all that and went to work for a commercial swimming pool company, Aquatic Pools out of Rockville, Maryland, where I would travel the Mid-Atlantic as a superintendent and see facilities in different jurisdictions and how they were built. And my responsibility at that time was the finish end. So I took it from the structural shell through the tile, the plaster, the construction of the pool decks, the equipment rooms, and then getting the pool accepted by the regional health department or the Environmental Protection Agency. Went on to become their construction manager, project manager, and then left Maryland and moved into Virginia, where I discovered things weren't as regulated in most of Virginia as they are in Maryland in general. Northern Virginia is more like Maryland, but below that, the Environmental Health Department, code written in 1962, pretty much covers recreational facilities or tourist establishments, meaning hotels, campgrounds, water parks, and that they would not address, let's say, your university pools, your city pools, your YMCAs, but even more importantly, your apartment complexes, community pools. There is no health department regulating the operation of those facilities. So they're pretty much on their own, which is a concern I have that brings me into my design aspect and kind of a campaign I have for improving the safety of treated recreational waters in Virginia in particular, but even beyond that. I recently learned that over 20 states have no requirement for licensed pool operators or even lifeguards at what I consider public pools. Which you can imagine, if there's nobody with any training at all, if the training would be just passed down from one employee to the next or one volunteer to the next, over a course of time, things can get lost as far as the operation of the facility, but also in the monitoring of the facility. So what I see is when I grew up, things were very safe and I was protected as a youngster. I'm concerned about my grandchildren and the pools that they're going to be swimming in here in Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, so there's really a personal element to your mission too, as far as, I mean, you know, obviously, there's a common theme here with a lot of my guests that I speak to is when it comes to water safety, and anywheres in the aquatics, and it seems like things have started in their life at very, very young age. And you're probably, you know, as many professionals started, you know, being thrown into the water when they were just, you know, as soon as they were born, and learned to swim at a very young age and got involved, and then went into being a lifeguard through American Red Cross system, and in many cases put themselves through college this way, and then come back into, you know, the community, either one way or the other, or maybe enter corporate America and then find themselves coming back to, I think, what their real passion or maybe what their calling is, and that's really to make a difference. I know when we were talking, I mean, you shared some information with me, from everything from pumps, and especially with older pools, and with some of the things with the older pools that maybe that predate PVC piping, different things like that, and that can really change the dynamics of the operation of a pool. And part of this, maybe so maybe it's the average person who's listening to this, and they're planning on, and they attend their local community pool, or they go on vacation and they're attending a pool. Maybe you can kind of sum this up and tie this together to say, what should the average person look for, I think, in maybe an older pool like that?
Well, it all kind of became more public about 10 years ago when President Bush at the time signed into law what we call the Virginia Graeme Baker Act, or the VGB Act, and that addressed design criteria as well as other safety criteria for both public and private residential swimming pools. It really comes about from a little 6-year-old girl, Virginia Graeme Baker, who was at a Northern Virginia residence, and somebody turned on the jets in the spa that she was in, and immediately she was drawn to the bottom of that little spa, and her body was trapped on the suction port at the bottom of that little spa, and her mother and I believe another adult could not pull her off. And nobody thought to just turn off the pumps, which was really the cause of the problem. That, of course, led to the law of the Virginia Graeme Baker Act. She was the granddaughter of former Secretary of State James Baker. But it's something that my trade association, the Association of Swimming Pool and Spa Professionals, had been working on trying to change laws for about a 20-year period. We recognized or saw that children and even adults were having entrapment issues with the way the pools, the more modern pools, were being designed, and even a problem with the older pools. There's evisceration of children and their bowels sitting on suction fittings, or persons with longer hair becoming entrapped in a designed drain cover or something where the suction was so great. Now, many of us who were following the trade association guidelines had changed that as early as the early 90s. But because it wasn't a law, it was just a guideline, it wasn't mandated that designers and builders do that. So the law enabled that. But one of the other things the law addressed, and you touched on it, was some even older facilities. I've been to a couple facilities here in Virginia that are private schools that are certainly not subject to the tourist establishment rating of the health department, or not visited by the health department. And maybe people don't understand or realize that once a building department leaves a pool or facility that is either new or has just recently been renovated, they don't return. So in essence, on a private facility like one of these private schools, or even a community pool, they don't see any regulatory people again. And I've asked people, so doesn't your insurance company come in and check things? And I had one facility that said, well, we're self-insured. And so the answer is really a no. And it's not that these people are all greedy or looking to escape responsibility. Many of them are just people looking to provide our youth with a place to go and learn how to swim and enjoy the water. And they don't recognize the potential dangers that are there. For instance, on some of these older private schools, what I found is they were built in the early 30s. And back then, they didn't have plastic pipe. They either used a copper pipe or a galvanized pipe. And if you were to think about it, if you had a galvanized piece of metal and you're running chlorinated water through it under pressure or under suction, the inside of that pipe will eventually begin to rust. And the way I kind of explain it, right now I'm making a C with my left hand and the backside of a D with my right hand, and I'm putting together. So I have basically a circle in my hands. So it starts off new as that shape, but over time, as that rust begins, that circle or that pipe becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and even smaller in diameter. So you can imagine galvanized piping, what it looks like after 10 years. Well, what does it look like after 80 years or 90 years? That pipe diameter is fairly small. Well, at these facilities, because there's no regulatory agency looking out over them, if the pump goes bad, and gosh, if we had a pump last 10 years, that's pretty good. So you can imagine how many pumps a facility built in the 30s have gone through. And they don't necessarily understand the hydraulics or what the inside of that pipe is looking at. So they just go to a supply house and they find a pump that's available because the pool wants to be open, people want to go swimming, and they just want to deal with it as best they can. So they just buy what's on the shelf. So I found facilities with oversized horsepower pumps with small diameter pipes caused by the corrosion, and the velocities of water that are going through that are allowing suctions of 2, 3, maybe even 4 times what is legally allowed by design. And the same facilities, because there is no regulatory agency checking on them, they might have a drain cover that is loose. They may have one drain cover as opposed to the now required 2 drain covers, being a minimum 3 feet apart. And the new drain covers are secure to the bottom of that. So we have a great potential for danger. And of course, many of these operators, or I shouldn't say operators, but owners or management people taking care of the pool, they said, well, it hasn't been a problem in the past. It's probably not going to be a problem in the future. And that's a dangerous way to look at that. Somebody's going to get seriously hurt or, worst case scenario, killed simply because it costs money to make these changes or these repairs. Right. That's just one of the mechanical things, and I can tell you from personal experience, recent personal experience, that is true today. And even in campgrounds that are inspected by regulatory agencies. Just because it's a code doesn't mean that our regulatory agencies, our building departments, and our environmental health investigators are trained in knowing what to look for. And that's certainly something that would require a greater degree of investigation. Mm-hmm. But there are things that they should be aware of, especially environmental health people, is the chemistry of the water. I know here in Virginia, I've been on inspections by regulatory persons at new facilities and older facilities. And, well, let's see, when I was working up in Maryland and Northern Virginia, it was pretty typical at the beginning of the spring for the health department to come out on a scheduled inspection and go through several pages of a checklist to make sure that facility was running in good shape. And that was a common thing. And then they might return on that summer facility as many as 3 times with surprise inspections just to make sure that the rules and regulations were being adhered to, that the pool was safe for the public. And if it wasn't, they had no problem shutting it down. And the embarrassment would be, of course, on the management and those who were taking care of the pool, because they would be well aware of what the codes and the laws were, and they would just take care of it. And if they were closed down, that was not only embarrassing, but it was costing somebody money, and therefore it was just uncommon to see a pool closed down. Not because the health department officials were shy about doing it, but because the pools were that better regulated. Here in most of Virginia, that's just not the case. They'll come in on that scheduled inspection. They'll check chlorine and pH. And frequently, I've seen them not even check out to see if the pump is running. Mm-hmm. So on a scheduled inspection, you can have you can manipulate chlorine and pH to get it where they want it to be, and then and not even have the equipment running. So that's a potential problem. And then they may or may not come back during the summer for a follow-up inspection, and certainly may not even be a surprise. So it's really swim at your own risk, quite literally, whether there's lifeguards there or not. Mm-hmm. So that I could see this as a problem, and it's not just common to Virginia, but common to many of the states here in the U.S. There's a lot more to running a swimming pool than just the mechanical side and the pool chemistry and the sanitation side. So much so that the Centers for Disease Control has actually published what they call the Model Aquatic Health Code, and they're on their 3rd edition. And it is just a model. It's designed to be used as a model for environmental health agencies to update their codes or create codes that maybe they've never had before. I was in North Carolina just last week, and I was talking to people from all over the country, but in particularly the East Coast, and I was hearing stories that were just, from a professional standpoint, just unbelievable. Here we are in 2019, and we have state and county regional health departments with no codes at all about the care of what I would consider a public or a commercial swim facility. Up in Maryland, a commercial swim facility or a public swim facility is anything that's not residential, basically. It's more defined than that, but it kind of gives you a good idea. And that's definitely not true here in most of Virginia.
Right. Well, I tell you what you just kind of summed up in the last 10 minutes or so is there's a wealth of information here to take away. I know in the water safety, drowning, and prevention space, the things that we typically see, we talk a lot about are layer protections. These are before people get in the water. And then the other aspect that I talk a lot about is drowning detection. That's to be able to detect a person maybe before they actually begin to drown, which is really a technology base. But what you're really talking about is I'm looking at this as a parent. Okay, somebody who is not trained in a facility, and you expect people to do their jobs. You expect the inspectors to do their job. You expect the lifeguard, expect the pool manager to hire and train the people properly in everything. And I think the average person doesn't think about some of the mechanical issues, maybe the age of the equipment, because again, we're there to have fun. We're there to enjoy the day, cool off, whatever that is. Is it if an average person would want to check out? I mean, are the inspections posted? Are they public record? Is that something if somebody wanted to know? Hey, how old is this pool? Or if they wanted to know anything about the upkeep. I mean, is this something that I don't think people probably do this, but if somebody wanted to. Is that easy to get your hands or to find this information out?
It really depends on the jurisdiction and what their particular codes are. For instance, in Maryland, when I was up there, and that was 15 years ago, and for my entire career up in Maryland, we would keep written records of the water chemistry, particularly chlorine and pH. When I first started, it was every hour. And then the law changed, and then about 10 years later, and it was every two hours. But But even then, they weren't looking at other components of pool chemistry like alkalinity, which is formerly known as known as total alkalinity, but also calcium hardness, cyanuric acid, which is commonly referred to as stabilizer, would be required. But there's other components to water chemistry, including the water temperature, the turnover rate of the equipment. How often does that body of water, let's say it's 100,000 gallons, how often does 100,000 gallons actually go through the filtration system, and how often is it treated? Is it monitored by just the lifeguards, or is it electronically or automated chemistry? These are important things. So back to your question, what can the common person do? Well, I can tell you that on those pools that are inspected by the regional health departments here in Virginia, they're supposed to have a whiteboard that's available for everybody to see, and they're supposed to post the chlorine level and the pH level. Some people will actually put their stabilizer level on that board, and even air and water temperature, which is really being nice. But let's just say my local country club or my local apartment complex or even the local city pool are not required to do that. So the question is, those individuals who are managing or taking care of those facilities, I want to stay away from the word operating, those facilities, they are not required. And it's really up to them whether they want to be that consumer or patron friendly that they are posting those things. And that's certainly going to vary throughout the U.S.
Mm-hmm. If somebody, if that information is not readily available and somebody doesn't, but I'm there with my children or grandchildren, what should I look out for? What would be things that maybe would stand out to me to whether or not I would feel that this pool, as far as the upkeep and the maintenance and the water quality, what would I want to look for, at least from a visual standpoint?
Well, a lot of people feel that the water is clear, that you can see through it. It's very translucent. There's a nice snap to the water, that the water is healthy. And that's not necessarily true. The water can be very crystal clear and just be riddled with contaminants that could be dangerous. So I do want to point out that if there are licensed pool operators or lifeguards on staff, that's not necessarily in their control. They didn't design the systems. They may be operating what is there, but if what is there is meeting bare minimums and not really addressing the overall holistic issues associated with the water, it's really not going to be their fault. They're going to be doing perhaps the very best they can with what they have. So you might think it's up to the manager. Well, if the manager or the owner aren't being, because they're not necessarily aquatics experts, if they don't have environmental health officials telling them what to do, regulating them, making sure, providing them with snap inspections or surprise inspections and holding them accountable, well, then they're just doing what they feel is best to run a profitable business or facility. Just trying to avoid problems. And to them, if the water looks nice and clear, they're probably thinking it's healthy as well. So even with the environmental health officials and the inspectors, they're just following the law. If the law doesn't tell them to come out and make snap inspections or surprise inspections, to check more than just chlorine and pH, then it's really, they're just doing their job. So really, it needs to come from the politicians that will enact or create environmentally correct or safe codes that regulate these swimming pools and spas and splash grounds and spray parks and that type of thing, water parks, to make sure that these are safe for the public. And I'm talking about anybody outside of a residential pool. certainly the owner of a residential pool has some responsibility to whoever's getting in that pool, and you would hope that they would be wary about that to take care of themselves. But back to the public side. So it comes from the politicians, and we should all hope here in the United States that politicians are listening to their constituents. So one of the aspects that I'm really liking about this podcast is that we're getting the word out and making people aware, and maybe they're not going to be assuming so much that their pools are safe. Mm-hmm. So what can you do? You can ask if they have readings, and if to see if they've kept them for a period of time. If they're posting them on the wall, you would ideally know what the numbers that they're posting mean. Every swimming pool is a little bit different. Every spa is a little different. Every splash pad, depending on source water, climate, and usage, and that type of thing. But a general accepted range for pH is between 7.4 and 7.6. Think of the pH scale. It goes from 0 to 14. 7 is neutral in nature, but for swimming pools, we like to see it between that 7.4 and 7.6. And just to give you an idea of how quickly things could be out of whack, a pH of 7.8 or 8.0, you are drastically out of whack. And all your other chemistries, including your sanitizers in a swimming pool, are based upon a pH of about 7.4. So if you go higher, that sanitizer is less effective. Sanitizer levels. Depending on what you have, your method of sanitizing the water, chlorine being the most common, and chlorine in itself is a very good sanitizer. It's definitely the most popular, and it's available in several different means. And there's a misnomer out there that salt is not chlorine. That is not correct. When you have a saltwater pool, you are actually making chlorine from that salt. So you're actually becoming a manufacturer at your own facility. So salt is chlorine. So salt levels can have an impact on the chemistry. Your chlorine, depending if you're using a stabilizer, you could have it. Oh, when I first started, if we had a 0.4 chlorine, and when I say 0.4, that is 0.4 parts per million of chlorine in the water. That's how effective the chlorine was. But when they started adding the stabilizers, the cyanuric acids, that jumped up pretty dramatically. It went from a 0.4 minimum to like a 1.5, so it actually more than tripled if you had a stabilizer in your water. And on that, I'm not a big fan of the stabilizers. What the stabilizer does is there's two things that primarily kill chlorine. Number one being sunlight, and number two, dirty people. So naturally, on a hot sunny day on an outdoor pool, you're going to go through quite a bit of sanitizer to keep that water healthy. So what the stabilizer does, it's basically a sunblock. It slows down the effects of the sun in killing the chlorine, so that the chlorine is there longer. And the reason you need higher levels, it also slows down the reaction time of that chlorine in killing those bacteria that we want it to. That's why they require higher levels. So at your pool, you could see anywhere from, I've seen it as low as 0.4 again. That's first time in about 30 years I've seen 0.4s. But they have specialized equipment or secondary sanitation systems that are allowing them to get there. But commonly you should see about a 1.5 to about a 3.0 or even a 5.0. I will point out that in Europe, they've been doing this a whole lot longer than we have. You'll see sanitizer or chlorine levels as high as 10.0. And I've seen health officials in more regulated areas. If they see a 5.0 and their maximum is a 3.0, they're not too worried. But if they see it below a 1.0, they're worried, and they'll close you down. So the higher sanitizer is not frowned upon. It's the lower sanitizers. And you think, well, that's where we get that smell, or my eyes start to burn, or my skin dries up, or my blonde hair turns green. It's when the chlorine's that high. I can tell you as a professional, most of the time it's not as a result of the chlorine. It's a result of a pH imbalance or something else going on in the water. So that's a mistake to think that.
Yeah, something you were talking about when you started off talking about how clear the water is doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. It made me think of, because one of the things that I know we talk a lot about is, make sure the water's clear, that you can see the bottom. Obviously, that way if somebody would be struggling or be in trouble, you can see, and sometimes water is cloudy. So again, just because the water may be clear doesn't necessarily mean the water's completely healthy, but at the same time, if we have a pool that's cloudy, how does that play in the whole scheme of things?
Well, in a well-regulated facility, indoor or outdoor, doesn't matter. Or even if it has a certified pool operator, they call them CPOs, it's commonly known that if you could see the main drain grate, the suction outlet on the bottom of the pool, if you could see that from the deck nearby, then your water is clear enough to swim in. If you can't see that, that's an indicator that you need to close the pool down until the water clarity improves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so that's
certainly something, a parent can easily see that.
Exactly. Obviously, too, when as you were talking again earlier, and this probably goes down to the Virginia Baker-Graham Act and everything. If you see pool drains and suction ports or whatnot that might be missing screws, things like that, that's obviously a telltale sign too of maybe there may be other issues going on here that are not being taken care of. Would you agree with that?
Certainly. And as a parent or a grandparent, you could ask the person in charge of the pool or monitoring the pool, assuming that they're on the deck, when's the last time the health department was here, and would it be possible for me to look at that report?
Exactly. Yeah, that's case in point in my daughter's accident. Our pool was inspected by health departments, as many public pools that are, and they're looking at specific things, and they don't always look at just what's on their checklist, really. So I think that's an important thing. We've got a lot of information here. We could probably make 2 or 3 podcasts, but you were sharing me. Let's talk about the conference you just attended, because you were sharing with me before we started recording this. Sounds very, very interesting because, with what we've been talking about, you can really expand on this. So tell us a little bit about the conference, what you just went to. I think that was the one in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned earlier. So tell us a little bit about that and what some of your key takeaways that you're coming back with on
that. The conference was called the Ultimate Pool, and it was put on the Aquatic Swimming Pool Equipment Company, which is a high-end designer and builder and manufacturing company for competitive and indoor pools. All competitive pools aren't necessarily indoor. But one of the things that they had discovered or had actually noted a few years back was that lifeguards or swim coaches or even swimmers were having trouble breathing in these indoor facilities. And anybody that's walked into a hotel with an indoor pool can probably relate to you that as soon as they walk in the door, they could tell you that they had a swimming pool, and they could probably almost point to where it was without even seeing it, because there was that smell. And everybody thinks that's chlorine. That's actually a chloramine. And a chloramine is when that chlorine is tied up fighting a battle. And that battle is with sweat or pee or diarrhea or other bacteria that may be in the water. And it's no longer really doing its function as a sanitizer. What it is that smell that you're getting. And that smell, everybody thinks that, that's kind of a healthy smell because that's the chlorine. Well, to be honest, it's not. And what we've discovered over the course of these last few decades is that kids are getting sick, lifeguards are getting sick, and particularly swim coaches who are there for most of the day, where they might have one swim team leave and another swim team show up. They're there for an extended period of time, and they're breathing in that material that's gassing off of the chemistry in the water and entering the atmosphere. And the problem is that designers of the HVAC systems, architects and engineers, and even, yes, us pool people, didn't recognize that as an issue. And what we were finding is that kids were getting sick. One of the takeaways from last week was that children's up to the age of 5, their lungs are still developing. And as they breathe in this contaminated air, in trying to become swimmers or establishing a healthy lifestyle as promoted by their parents, are actually getting sick or injured because of the air quality. So one of the things that this particular company, Paddock Pool Equipment Company, had come up with, and apparently they have patents on it, is something called their evacuator. And what the evacuator is, it is a fan system that collects that contaminated air right off the surface of the water and then vents it to the outside. So it's certainly a benefit for the swimmers. It's certainly a benefit for the coaches and the lifeguards. And they have found that the facilities that have these types of devices or upgraded HVAC systems, they're not having all the health issues that older pools or pools designed without these things are having. So yes, swimming is a very great lifestyle. It is a great sport, and I don't certainly want to detract from the benefits of swimming by sending a big scare out there. But what people need to know, and they need to demand from their politicians and their facility owners and management people, is that they improve not just the water quality and maintain it, but they improve or design facilities that are going to have air quality that is suitable for human beings.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking about that, and I walking into a motel or hotel. First of all, you always see the sign "Swim at your own risk," but now that adds a whole nother, thought process, because you're absolutely right. I remember we was in Connecticut not too long ago. As soon as we walked into the building to the front desk, I mean, you can immediately smell. And I've always thought, hey, well, there's chlorine or whatever. That's kind of, the smell that you're thinking. Or I know when we used to have our in-ground pool, obviously, when springtime would come and we would shock the hell out of the pool, always had a pretty strong smell to it, too, at that particular point in time. But I guess it's just like anything else. I mean, our human bodies, I mean, when we get sick, our body's battling an infection, battling, bacteria or viral, and then we cough and we put off all these other things. So pool's really kind of doing the same thing. So really, I guess another way to look at it is if the pool's really emitting some really strong odor and smells, then the pool's kind of sick, right?
Not necessarily. It's killing off what's sick. It may be killing off what's sick in the water, and that's the byproduct of that. So. You gave me a thought. You said swim at your own risk. Now we're talking about breathing at your own risk.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, you said earlier too that there's a disease now. And I think and I don't remember the name of it, but it made me think of the coal miners. They go in and it's called black lung. And what was that you said that there's people now that are being diagnosed with issues, and they now need like inhalers, or there's certain things to help with this?
It's called Lifeguard Lung. And I hadn't heard about that until last week at this conference. And there's the medical term, and forgive me if I butcher this, but it's granulomatosis pneumonitis, or It's kind of a pneumonia of sorts, where you're breathing in this burnt-off material from the water, and it's getting into your lung and it's causing respiratory problems, bronchitis, and other ailments. And what they found, and you can go online and Google Lifeguard Lung, and you'll find several articles about it from medical doctors and agencies. Even the CDC has printed information on this. But they're not looking at it as a real problem just yet. But one of the really nice takeaways from last week was they had a panel of swimmers. These were all adults. There was an aquatics director from Liberty University was there. There was Rowdy Gaines, an Olympian, and color commentary for swimming events like the Olympics, NCAA, and others. And one of the things that they were really hot on was this problem with that. They were talking about when they were coaching or even swimming, it was not unusual to see an inhaler at the end of each swim lane or several inhalers at the end of each swim lane for the various swimmers that are in the water. And what they noticed is when these pools were updated with these evacuators or these better HVAC systems, the inhalers started to disappear. You didn't see them as often. And what we're finding out, or what they were telling us, is that if in NCAA competitions, for instance, we took a visit down to Queen's University down there in Charlotte. It's a private school, Division II. They've won the NCAA for the last 4 years, their swim team. And one of the things they have is one of these paddock systems. And when we took the tour, I've been around doing this for over 45 years now. And one of the things that I noticed is when I opened up the door to the facility, I didn't smell that. So I'm walking through the building, and then they take us down to the pool, and they open the door to the pool, and I'm expecting that really rush of hot, warm, smelly air to hit me in the face. And it just wasn't there. It was very comfortable. It was like almost like the rest of the building, not quite, but very close to the rest of the building. And everybody's walking around with smiles. And they even told us that normally they would have so many away meets a year at other universities. And those universities were calling them up and saying, hey, can we have the meet at your place? Because your air is so much better.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's even you're having these college swimmers. I mean, you would think a swimmer has a really huge bent on having a healthy body and maintaining that body in a healthy way. And they are making a conscious decision to go to the places that have this better air quality.
Yeah, I just sit here and think everything you shared to me with us here today and what you and I have talked about as we kind of begin to wrap up here. But I know it was, the cost to operate a pool has to be, I mean, not just trying to keep, the swimmers and the staff and keep people safe, but everything else that goes into it. And a lot of these pools are being run by nonprofits, so obviously the cost of upkeep and taking care of a pool has to be a huge problem with them. But at the same time, with everything that's new that we're learning, and to keep people safe, not only in the water but out of the water, or even the people that might be working around the water, has to be a huge concern for a lot of these organizations that run pools, public pools, private pools, things like that. So so I can't help but be fearful that in some cases when you have to take monies from a budget and put them here, that something may kind of like borrow from Peter to pay Paul type thing, that maybe something might be lacking when it comes to safety. Is that, whether or not you've seen that or not, is that maybe some concern, or has there been conversations about things like that?
Well, funny that you mention it, because last week one of the high points, because we had designers there, I'm not sure if we had any architects with us, but we had aquatics designers, which I'm in that field now. Um, One of the things that was discussed was something that's commonly referred to as value engineering in construction. Uh, when you establish a budget and you put down all your wants and your wishes on that list and you apply a budget number to them, it goes out to bid and it comes back and it's higher than your budget. Well, that's when they usually kick in something called value engineering. And what value engineering is basically saying, okay, what are we going to make smaller? What are we going to remove? What are we going to change to a different product to get that budget number down, or that bid number down, to an acceptable budget number? And one of the big takeaways was that this panel of swimmers was really insisting that improved heating and air conditioning ventilation systems, this paddock evacuator, not be removed in the value engineering process. One of the points that they made is that the whole facility is there for the swimmers. And if the swimmers are getting sick from the water or from the air, well, then you've really failed as a budget process in delivering that requirement to those swimmers, to those people enjoying the pool. The other part of that is I met with another consultant who also has been in the industry for over 40 years, and he at one time was an aquatics director for a county where they just spent millions of dollars on this new indoor facility, and they had to close it after 3 years, and it was condemned. And the reason was the air quality was so bad. And at the time they didn't realize what it was doing to the swimmers, but it was actually attacking the building and causing all kinds of corrosion and issues with the building. I witnessed that myself on a facility I was working on a couple decades ago up in New Jersey on an indoor water park where they were having issues the first month. And my company we were the builders, kept sending me back up there to fix the water. Well, I could turn the water back around in as little as 24 to 36 hours. But what I couldn't deal with, what I didn't have the experience or the knowledge in, was how to deal with the air. And they were pulling their air filters out of the system that were just dripping with this green goo. And nobody knew what was causing it. So it's a relatively new discovery. And we really need to get the pool water quality people and the air quality people together to resolve this issue for both the health of certainly the swimmers, the patrons of the pool, but also for the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I hope everybody listening here has got. I think there's a lot of golden nuggets here, and we've got a lot of good takeaways. And Tim, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, get in touch with you, I mean, do you have a website, or what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you if they wanted to speak to you about anything?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn, Tim Coleman, and my company's name is Fluid Design Concepts, and we do have a website, although it's under development since this is kind of a startup. But that is fdcva.com. So Fluid Design Concepts Virginia.com. But it's really an acronym, so it's fdcva.com.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we have links to everything and your link. Are you on other social channels besides LinkedIn?
Not at this moment. I'm really trying to reach out to architects and the landscape architects, owners. And certainly I found your posts on LinkedIn of interest, and that's why I reached out to you.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's a big part of our outreach. We're on all social platforms ourselves, but the LinkedIn's where we spend a lot of our time, again, with our outreach and trying to reach people like yourselves and other aquatic professionals to get, to build partnership and to build relationships with, because in order to solve the problem, just like you said, bring the water quality and the air quality people, but when we talk water safety, drowning prevention, I believe in order to solve the problem, we all have to work together in all areas, and so everybody needs to come together. And I think that's a real key and important part, because one area is not less deserving than the other area, because it's all about safety of the people that are attending the pool. And I think the average person, I know for myself, I can speak for myself on this, is when my daughter drowned, it's what I didn't know before she drowned. And it's everything that I've learned afterwards has really opened my eyes, over the last 25 years. What we learned 25 years ago. And then with the advent of technology, the testing, with just like what you're talking with air quality and how to remove that and improve that. I mean, where we have come from and where we are today and where we can be to tomorrow, I think is a real key thing in order to do that. I think it's going to take a huge effort with everybody getting on the same page. So, Tim, I appreciate your time. You gave us a wealth of information, and I hope we have opportunities to work together on some programs and projects, and definitely reach out to Tim via LinkedIn and share if you have questions, if you have any information, maybe a personal story of your own, because I know that's information that he can also provide. So, Tim, thank you a lot, and we appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
I want to thank everyone for staying to the end of the episode. Make sure you get back over to thekelsgroup.com and subscribe to the podcast. Go ahead and get connected up with Tim over on LinkedIn. Also, give some great feedback here. Leave a comment or a question on the post here on our website. Also, you can record your question or comment. We just might play that on a future episode. Make sure that you rate us and give us thumbs up on our podcast over at Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, and on our website at thekelsgroup.com. Also, you want to tune in next week. Our guest next week will be Journey Amos. She is an aquatic supervisor and operator there in Baytown, Texas. If you don't know where that is, hey, it's outside of Houston, Texas, a rather large water park. I'll keep that part to myself. Hey, you'll want to tune in next week so you can catch that. It's going to be an interesting show. Hey, with that being said, you guys keep it safe. Be safe. Water safety, drowning prevention. Remember, drowning does not discriminate. It does not take a day off. It shows up when you least expect it. So keep safety first of mind, foremost of mind, right in front of you at all times. See you guys later.